Welcome to my cooking class as part of this course. Now, when you're going to be starting to cook, and if you haven't cooked from scratch very much, you need to have a few basic dishes. Now, this probably looks like a lot, but I'll explain that you don't necessarily need all of these. So when I cook, I like to cook a lot, and the reason for that is it saves time. Now, it doesn't necessarily save money in that we in the family are still going to be eating the same amount of food, but it saves a lot of time in that I don't have to do this every night to cook dinner or every lunch. So I cook a lot, and then I don't have to cook for 3 or 4 or 5 days, depending on how much it is. And I literally don't have to, bring all the pans out, cook everything again, clean it all. So I like efficiencies. So this is what I have learned how to do in the last few years, and it really works. So basically, I need some things to put in the oven. I prefer to cook in glass. The non-stick isn't going to start to come off. It's consistent heat, and it usually doesn't burn very quickly. If you put a metal pan in the oven and you don't watch it a lot, then you're going to more likely burn things. So I prefer glass. You can't cook things as hot, I've noticed, so I never cook past around 380 or 400 degrees. It works great, and it's fairly easy to clean because I can just scrape, it doesn't matter what I'm using to scrape it off. So I like glass pans for the oven. Once in a while I will do a sheet pan, but I don't like these non-stick because they scratch up a lot, and then it's hard to cook on them because you don't know if you're gonna be eating some of those. So I'll line it sometimes with parchment paper. I need a few bowls. I'll be needing a few bowls to mix things. I'll need a strainer for boiling eggs. In the last year, I've found a way to steam the eggs, and the peels come off easy. I've got my good cutting knife, a cutting board, peeler, and to sharpen the knife before I start chopping a lot, because there's a lot of chopping involved. I usually try and sharpen it once a week. I have some kitchen scissors, a few spoons. Got my grater here for cheese if I'm going to make cheese sauce or just grated cheese. I've got a few utensils here that I'll probably be using. I've got the metal spatula and also plastic spatula. I've got my garlic press. When my wrists are feeling strong, I can use this. Otherwise, I'll just chop, and I can show that in the future. I've got a whisk for when I'm making. I've got a whisk for if I'm making the cheese sauce. Then I've got a couple pans. I've got a few small frying pans. These are non-stick. I've got a big pan, which actually now this is how I cook my bacon. And then I've got a cast iron pan. This is a fairly large one, which I like because then for a while I was using the next size smaller and things would just start spilling out. Now you'll notice there is rust on it. Now I personally want the iron in my body. It's good to have some iron in our body, and because I don't usually take supplements, then this is how I'm getting some iron. So I do wash it out with a scrubber every single time. I know people will say don't ever do that, but I wash it out, and yes, it rusts. Then I wash it once more to get that top layer of rust out, and then I start cooking right away. And so that's what I'm doing to get my iron in my body instead of taking supplements. I've got my pot holders. Now this is a gas oven. For the last, up until 2 months ago, I was using an electric oven, and so I'm still getting used to this one. I have to turn all the vents on, which isn't super fun and makes it loud. So this is the prep for all of the things that I'm going to need to do this bulk cooking, and I need around 3 hours. So that's what we're going to need. Okay, I'm going to start by sharpening my knife. I got it a little bit wet, and I'm just going to go forward on the one side. This is just a very simple knife sharpener. And then I'm going to pull it towards me very carefully so I don't cut my hand. And I'm at about a 45-degree angle. I will show you there is another way to sharpen knives. I learned this in the restaurant I used to work at. I don't have another big knife right now, but even if you just have 2 knives, and you can just go like this. Now this has serrated edges, so I'm actually going to use the back side of this one. It's just another metal surface. very, very carefully, you're going metal on metal. Anyways, that's one way. Or if you have one of these, or if you have a actual proper knife sharpener, just take your time. This one has one with more grit and then one with less grit, so that it finishes it off. And then you just rinse this off in the water to get all of those little filings off. And the way you tell if it's sharp enough is you take your thumb and you go across it, and if it feels like it's got some grit to it, then it's sharp. Now we're going to bring out all of the vegetables and fruits that I bought, and I'm going to show you what 20 types of vegetables and fruit looks like. And this is what I'm going to use to cook today. This is the pile of food, and I'll take it all out of its packaging. So here are over 20 varieties of vegetables and fruit. I have a broad definition for vegetables, basically anything that's come out of the ground. And so I do put potatoes as part of vegetables, which it's actually a tuber starch. I also have sweet potatoes, which is a tuber, but I put it in the category of vegetables. I have garlic and I have parsley. Parsley is an herb. I've got parsley, spinach, beans, cucumbers, garlic, celery, peppers, sweet potatoes, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, peas, carrots, broccoli, onions, tomatoes, zucchini, and cabbage. And then I also have a coleslaw mix, which is a pre-cut up ones, which actually has everything that I already have here except for the red cabbage. I don't have a red cabbage. Then I have some fruit. These are perfectly good bananas. I keep them in the fridge after they are almost ripe, and they can last for almost a week in the fridge. They go brown on the outside, but they're fine on the inside. I've got a lemon, some frozen berries, a pear, and some kiwi. So there's more than 20 here, but this is an example of what I go and buy, and then I cook it up or prepare it, and then I have it for several days. Now I'm going to probably only use a quarter of the cabbage. I'll use all of these. I'll use all of this, and probably half of the cauliflower. If I cook too much, then I get tired of it, or not enough people in the house eat it up. We're eating sort of the same foods, because this isn't talking about any of the meat yet. This is just the vegetables and fruits. And of course, I have blueberries almost every day, or some frozen fruit every day, but this is just an example of what 20 varieties looks like. Now, if you do not have access to get all of these varieties, if you would prefer to not eat these types of foods, then try to, experiment, try to bring in as many varieties. I used to hate Brussels sprouts. Now I've figured out, thanks to my daughter, how to cook them that they don't taste so bad. I used to not like sweet potatoes. Now I cook them and I incorporate them. It's not my favorite thing, but I have a few bites. My daughter loves those. I figured out how to make cauliflower that doesn't taste awful. So the first thing I'm going to do is wash everything. I have a handy dandy wash thingamajiggy. I'm going to wash the beans first so I can put them in this and wash them in the sink. And what I'm going to do with the beans is I'm going to cut the ends off, even though they're not too bad. And yeah, I'm going to put the berries and the bananas back in the fridge, and the pear, because that's just an example of what you're going to eat, but we're not going to actually eat it today. So what I do with the beans is I line them up. I cut off the edges or all of the ends, and I just line them up like that. And then I cut them into bite-sized pieces, basically, so they're easier to eat. If I'm going to put something in the glass dishes, I'm going to put them in here and season them. And so this is what I'm going to do with the seasoning part. And so I'm cutting off the ends, and some of them are rotten meat. Line them all up, cut off the ends. It's not the end of the world if some of them are there. bite-sized pieces. Now I have a compost container with a compostable bag, so that's going to all go in the springtime. I'm going to put it in the garden, but for now I put it out in the recycle. So I'm just going to keep cutting these. When I was growing up, I'll tell you some stories of when I was growing up. I remember we had a big garden, and I remember sitting and we would snap the beans. Now these ones aren't very ripe, but when they're right off of the vine, they would make this snapping sound, and that's how we would cut them into smaller pieces, and then we'd put them in bags into the freezer, and we'd have those all winter long. That's my memory of beans. Growing them, weeding the garden. Back then we didn't know we should keep the ground covered, so it was all bare dirt around every plant, which means all of the weeds would show up, and all I remember was weeding the garden all summer long. So then after we're almost done this, we're going to season it. Now I have technically the 20 items, doesn't include spices. So I've heard it recommended you have 30 varieties of plants and vegetables of some sort throughout your week. So that also can include the pepper and any other, spices that I have. And I have them over here. And I cheated and bought a chicken and rib spice at Costco. So it's a little bit like really spicy. So I can add a little bit of that, just a tiny bit. You don't have to do that. I've many times just cooked with salt and pepper. And I got a new salt and pepper shaker, Christmas, that has this Himalayan salt. So what I'm doing is preparing it to put in the oven. And I have learned recently that salt is not bad for you if you cook from scratch. All of this prepared foods that we have in our diet have a lot of salt. But when you are not eating prepared foods, you got to add it because our body needs salt. Got my olive oil. I'm adding some olive oil to that, and that's almost ready to put on the pan. I'm going to add a tiny bit of cayenne pepper just for some more flavoring. And actually I'm going to use the regular salt because I know I need a little bit more. So I have all my pans everywhere. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you where that is going to go in one of those glass pans. So I've got the glass pan here, and I'm going to put a tiny bit of olive oil in there and spread it around. Then I'm going to toss this. So it's got the spices, the salt, a little bit of the olive oil. I'm going to put that in the pan. If it's not single layer, it won't brown as much, but that's fine. I'm just cooking them this way. It saves having to cook them on the top of the stove, and when you're doing a lot of different things, you want to not have everything to be cooked on the top because you'll be cooking for a long, long time. So it's sort of being efficient and making use of the whole oven and stove. So that's ready. It's put away, and those don't go brown. If I cut up the sweet potato too early, because what I'm doing is I'm prepping everything. If I cut up the sweet potato too early, I got to keep it in water because it will go brown. The potatoes go brown. Those are probably the only things that go brown, but just to remember that. So I'm going to do the potatoes last because they do go brown, and I don't want them sitting in water because if they sit in water, then I got to dry them off or they don't fry as well. So I'm going to take off the outer layer of the cabbage because it was just sitting. So I'm not actually washing everything. If I take off a peel, I'm not needing to wash that, but otherwise, yeah, whatever I'm actually going to eat directly, then I'm going to want to wash that. So I'm only going to cook about a quarter of this because I'm actually going to also use that pre-made coleslaw mix to show you that you can use that if you don't want to buy a whole cabbage. But cabbages are pretty cheap. I used to not like cabbages, and now I'm starting to like it. So I'm gonna, if you don't have a food processor, you can just cut this by hand. So if you'll notice, and when I was at Cook's training way back in the 80s, I learned how to cut things where if you can get a knife that's got this rocking option. If it's straight, then you're going to have to like lift it all the way up. But if you can keep part of the knife down at all points at all times, it goes faster. And so I'm just rocking it like that. This is a great knife my daughter bought me. So I'm wanting to chop these quite small. By the end, my wrist does get sore. So my daughter's boyfriend bought me a food processor at Christmas, which is great. But for this, I will show you how to chop things without using a food processor. Now I can't rock it when I've got so much here, so I'm just going to go like that, chop it up. So you want it fairly small. If you get a big bite of cabbage, it can be a bit bitter. So what I'm doing with this is I'm going to combine it with these. I'm going to put it in the same bowl that we used for seasoning the green beans. The thing about coleslaw I've noticed is it doesn't always, the pieces aren't always symmetrical. They put it through a mixer, which also I have found with any food processor is that you'll have pieces that go through. So you can always just chop it into smaller pieces. You want it to be uniform so that every bite you don't come across and one's bigger than the other. If you think of julienne, which is when you cut things in small, if you've been to a restaurant and they're cut into these small, long, thin pieces, the point of that is so that they're all very uniform. So when you're biting into something, it's consistent and everything is the same. Like for stew, you want the potatoes and the meat and the carrots to all be about the same size. Anyways, that's just something to know. I'm going to leave that for now because I'm actually going to be adding garlic and some onions and some parsley. So I'm going to grate the carrots. And when I was in cook's training at college, we would take these, we'd wash them first. We'd take this and we'd put them in this massive vat. It was about this big in diameter, about this deep. And all of the ends of the carrots, ends of onions, the peelings of the carrots, peelings of the potatoes, it would all get thrown in this great big vat of water, and that's how we made soup. I don't do it because personally, there's dirt. You can't get all the dirt out of these. Can't get all the dirt out of that. So, I mean, that's what we did back then, and we served it to the cafeteria. So, I'm going to make these about this size. I'll peel the other potato. These carrots I got at a local butcher shop that has local carrots, which was great. So they weren't in a bag. I think that's what these ones were. Maybe, I don't know, I forget. I cook it I shop at about 4 different places. I don't know if that's how far that dirt goes through. That's pretty good. Because I have in the spring I'm going to be having a garden, I don't mind throwing a lot out at that point. Now it's going in the recycle bin. But then I'm going to be looking forward to adding it to my garden. So I don't mind if I throw away a little bit more because it's just going to feed my garden. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting them in half and then in half again, and then I'm trying to, like I had said before, I'm trying to make them uniform. So the uniform shape, that helps with when you're eating it and also when it's cooking. If things are different sizes, they won't cook evenly. One will be overcooked and one will be undercooked. So I'm not looking up much because I don't want to cut my hand. I realized that I need to look up at the camera more. Here we are cutting these. These aren't very consistent. I'm rushing a little bit. But as you can see, this is a very rough kind of julienne. Julienne is a lot smaller. When we learned how to cut it, it's like that small or even smaller than that, and it takes a long time. I remember this brings back a memory in cooking school. I think we had to do it so they were very uniform, and we were judged on how small they were or how uniform they were to be able to cut up. Now, because I'm going to be putting this in the oven, so they're sort of roast carrots. I'm going to do exactly what I did with the beans. So I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil in the pan, and I'm going to season another pan. I'm going to go get another little pan. If you don't have glass pans, you can use a metal pan and either line it with parchment paper or just use it directly if it's not too beat up or it doesn't have a lot of the if you're not worried about the non-stick coming off, then you can go ahead and use a metal pan. So I'm just continuing to cut. I don't know if you can see this. I'm just continuing to cut these into fairly uniform pieces so that they will cook evenly. There we go. We're getting there. I don't think I have any memories of growing carrots when I was growing up. I'm trying to think. I don't know how we preserved carrots. We had a log house up in the woods on a mountain, and big garden. We grew pretty much everything, and we had a dirt basement. Literally dirt. It was dirt floor, dirt walls, and then the ceiling of the basement was the floor, and you had to go outside and walk around and then walk down this dirt path down into the basement. And so I'm pretty sure we probably had carrots. So it was always cool because it was in the dirt underground. And I'm pretty sure we probably had the carrots just loose in there because we could buy like 7 big containers, crates of apples, and they would last all winter long in there, and they wouldn't go bad. We had apples every day for lunch, so I'm guessing we could probably do that for the potatoes and carrots. I don't remember it, but that would make sense because they just won't go bad if they're at that temperature. So I'm guessing that's how we kept our carrots, but yeah, I don't remember that. I remember the peas and the beans because we actually had to, and the corn, we actually had to process those and put them in the freezer. So the peas we would shell. So we'd get a big bowl, big metal bowls, and we'd have peas in there, and you snap the top, and then with your thumb you push out all the peas into another bowl, and then my mom would blanch them, put them in boiling water for like 1 minute, I think, and then we'd put them in bags, and then those would go in the freezer. So we're getting there. This just takes a lot of time. If you do have there's a little bit of black on there, I'm not sure what that is. If you do have a slicer, this will go faster. If you don't, put on a podcast, put on your favorite show, and cut. Some of these will go faster than others. These ones take a little bit longer. Okay, so it's fairly consistent. So I'm doing the same thing where I have the olive oil in the bottom of the pan and a little bit of olive oil in here. Doesn't need too much. Okay, so I've got the olive oil in there. I'm going to add a little bit of salt. Now you might think that's a lot, but if you start learning to cook from scratch, you will realize that in comparison to restaurant food and processed foods, if you don't add salt, everything just tastes really bland. So you know that we're used to an awful lot more salt in our diet from all of that, and it's good. We need salt in our diet. Our bodies have to have salt. If you get a headache in the afternoon, and I learned this from the intermittent fasting community, you have a little bit of salt in some water, have some pickle juice, and it can take a lot of your headaches away. I've heard salt water can help with migraines, which I don't have migraines, but that would be very interesting to test that out. So same thing I did with the beans. Toss the carrots in some pepper and salt, and I'm putting them in that pan. Now what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to switch that because I really liked them last week. They were spread out more. If they're over top of each other, they're going to steam more. So I'm going to get the other pan. So I know there's a little bit of water and that's going to interact with the oil, but it will steam itself off, so it will be fine. In the oven, it will steam itself off. So I'm actually going to I'm going to use this other pan because I liked how if they aren't on top of each other, they get a little bit more crispy. Okay, so now I'm just setting this aside. Okay, so sweet potatoes, I think I mentioned in one of the other videos, I used to never like sweet potatoes. I didn't like the texture. I was, picky eater. And so I didn't even know how to cook them. So this is, like, I'm not following any recipes here. I'm just basically, this is the idea of the one ingredient food. You can see what the food looks like at the beginning and at the end, and it's not much difference. I'm not following a recipe. I'm just cooking each of the vegetables, a lot of them on their own or some of them together. But, and because there's so much variety, I don't get sick of it. These, like, you can use this if you want, but I guess it's not so bad. They're just messy. And I bang my knuckles. Okay. But I've used a knife a lot over the decades, so if you're not as used to using a knife like a grater, then go ahead and use the grater. You waste a little bit less. I bang my knuckles. Okay. Made a big mess here. They don't have to be absolutely perfect. You can do this over the sink too. I'm just doing it here so I can video this. But if you do it over the sink, then it's easier to clean up. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to basically do this exactly the same as I did the carrots, where they're fairly even size. Now it's awkward because they aren't an even, they're not like a carrot that's long and skinny. It's got this extra bump. But the point is that you want them as fairly regularly shaped so that they will cook uniformly. Okay, so I'm putting these in a pan and I'm going to fill them up to the top with cold water until I'm ready to cook. So they're completely covered, otherwise they're going to go brown. Now, when I actually cook them, I add salt to the water, but I can actually add some salt now. And that does make them taste a little better. And so let's see, what else are we going to do next? We're going to do the cauliflower. Now this is way too much for us to eat in 1 week with all this other food. So I'm going to just cook half of it. And this is going to be pan fried in the cast iron pan. So I'm taking the middle part out. This I'm going to rinse off. Now this, I don't like any of these little rotten parts. You can sometimes get these on sale and they're just covered, but literally you just trim off most of that black and it's fine now. So the way I've been cooking this lately is, and I've seen some recipes online on Pinterest for how to make, it's called cauliflower steak. So you like make it fairly thick and then you fry it like a steak. I prefer to cut it fairly thin. And I can just throw them in here for now and season them. So I'm just thinly slicing those. These pieces are a little bit big. I'm going to cut those in half. There, that's all I have to do for that. Those don't go brown. I don't have to season those right now. I'm going to clean this up. Always cleaning, cleaning, cleaning. I had forgotten to cut up part of my sweet potato. So I'll finish that now. Just cutting them as uniformly as I can. When I come across a part that has the black part in it, that's part of the peel. Cut out the black part. And put it in my pan. One of those is too long. So yeah, I was just trying to get them fairly much the same size. When I was growing up, the only time we ever had sweet potatoes was at Christmas or Thanksgiving, and they'd have it with marshmallows on top and sugar, and so I just did not like sweet and sour things together, and I always thought, well, they're sweet potatoes, but they're actually potatoes. Okay, these aren't very consistent. Get the idea. So I'm keeping them covered so they don't go brown till later. Now, the reason I am doing all this prep is to save on electricity, or if I had an electric stove, and to save on gas, where I have everything prepped and then I fill up the oven and cook everything all at once, and I have as many of the burners that I can. For this stove, I just use the back two so that the vent works better. So that's why I'm prepping everything first, because otherwise you're doing multiple things and you can forget about things in the oven if you are cooking while you're prepping. So I've found this works the best. I'm also, just like the cauliflower, I'm only going to cook half of this. Otherwise, we're going to have way too much food to eat in the next 4 or 5 days. So you can cut off the bottoms. If the broccoli has a long bottom to them, you can just cut them into small pieces and you can eat them. There's no difference to that. I try to cut them into bite-sized pieces like this. Cut them down the middle like that. Trim the bottoms till they get small. Trim these into bite-sized pieces. I did not wash this first, so I'm going to wash it after I cut it. So, and this is also sort of wanting them to all cook uniformly, but broccoli cooks very fast in comparison to other foods. I've got this here. So I'm going to put it in here. If you have a sieve, you can wash it with a sieve too. Now I've tried roasting broccoli in the oven. It gets really brown. It's hard to not have it overcook. What are we going to cut up next here? I'm going to cut, so these, I just left this out as an example, but this I would cut up raw cucumbers. The only other thing I use cucumbers for is for pickles. And tomatoes, I'm going to be adding to, actually I make this. This is a this is a stir fry. All of those things together I make into a stir fry in the oven. And this is the way I like the zucchini the best. Zucchini can get slimy and I don't like the texture, but if it's cooked with this, somehow it tastes really good. So I'm going to wash actually I'm going to save some of the celery for the pot roast, which is going to be in the slow cooker. But the rest of these, I'll save 2 of those. I'm going to wash these. I will show you what I have figured out for onions in a bit. I have to put on safety goggles because I cry. It's interesting, when I was in Brazil and I cut up onions, I never cried. I don't know what's in the onions, the type of onions that were down there. I didn't cry with those ones. But the ones up here, I should probably try different varieties of onions because maybe some of them won't make me cry as much. So these are going to be stir fried, or actually, you know what? I'm going to add these to the cabbage mix. They taste good with that. So I want them fairly small. I like the flavor, but I don't always like the texture of it. Now, when you're frying things together, if I put a tomato in and I want to fry it, the tomato is going to get overcooked. So you want things that are similar texture and take the same amount of time to cook. So celery and cabbage take about the same time to cook when they're chopped about this. And that's just from experiment that I've found. So I can cook them all together. If I'm going to be adding tomato pieces to that, I would keep it separate until this is almost all cooked, and then I would add that at the end. So I'm just mixing and matching, and I do this, I make it different each week just so that I have some variety. I do have an advantage in that I was cooking before I learned how to read and write. I was baking before I learned how to read and write. That advantage had some disadvantages to it also. And I went to professional cooks training when I was 18. And I was the main cook in the house for 28 years, and then 6 years since then also. So I have a lot of decades of cooks training. Yeah, it's just been a big part of my life, cooking. But what I've been doing in the last 2.5 years since I lost the 80 pounds, this is a different way to cook because I'm not using the grains and the starches and the pastas and the rices as much. And so this is a whole new way of cooking that I've learned. And I've discovered all kinds of things online from amazing people who are sharing their videos of how to cook like this too. And so yeah, this is new still to me. This is not the way I used to cook. It's a no-brainer in that you know you're eating healthy. There's no added, nothing's added. There's no nutrition labels on any of these. Even the cucumber, which has packaging technically because it's in plastic. There's no nutrition labels. It's one ingredient. So these are all going to cook at the same time. Now, I used to only eat. This is the thing. I've changed my eating so much. I used to only use green pepper because I thought maybe red peppers were too spicy. I don't know why. I never ever tried it. So now I buy the packages that have multiple colors in them except the green. The only thing I use green for now is to make omelets. They're a little bit, it's not as sweet. But these taste really good together, I've noticed. I'm looking forward to going to Italy in the near future. And a lot of people talk about the Mediterranean diet. And there's just a lot of color. The color is natural. It's not artificial. So the more color, the more vitamins in general. Or the richer the color, the deeper the color. So deep green has more certain vitamins than the celery would, which is, you just know you're going to get a lot of vitamins. I'm trying not to waste too much on these, but I'm also trying to go fast because this video is going on and on and on. That's the thing. This takes a while. So very rarely do I go a week without cutting myself. As you see, I'm doing a lot of chopping, and so I know you can get these gloves. I have one. I never use it because it's like awkward. You put on this hand, and then you're not as likely to cut your hands. But I've been cutting for a while, so, and if I get a cut finger, it's okay. Not the end of the world. I've had a lot of cuts. I remember in cooking college, I used to get burns because we were, cooking a lot in the ovens, and I would get burns across here from putting stuff in. And they say a burn takes 7 years to heal, like until that skin, regenerates. And sure enough, all of them have gone. But yeah, it would take about 7 years, I remember. So I'm preparing to go and get my goggles on to cut up the onions, but after I'm going to do that at the end. technically, I think onions and garlic are in the same food category. I'm not positive on that. My brain isn't working perfectly right now. I've tried these both in the oven and in the pan, and they work pretty much the same. I can actually monitor them better when they're in the pan, like to pan fry them. So I'm actually going to wash these and cut them up so they're ready to go. Now, if you don't have a microwave or don't want to use a microwave, you can get a little pan and heat it up in the oven, you know, like a mini baking sheet, and put all of your leftovers on a pan and put some aluminum foil or another lid over top. So you don't have to heat everything in the microwave. I tend to heat things in the microwave, but you can also not have a microwave and heat them up. In Brazil, we didn't have microwaves, so we learned how to heat everything on the stove. That's a funny shape. I don't know if I have to cut this much off. I'm just trying to get through this so that you can see what it's going to be like. So I'm cutting them into quarters. So they do better when there's more surface area because they're going to absorb the rest of the tastes and the spices. If I just tried to cook this is how we would have it growing up. They would just boil these. They just tasted awful. They'd smell the whole house up. But if you cook them with a lot of garlic, and then also have garlic sauce or mayonnaise or cheese sauce, that makes all the difference. Everything tastes better with cheese sauce, but that's just because I love cheese sauce. And so I'm just cutting them in general into quarters. It's not very exact here. Some of these are bigger, so I'm cutting them more often. What happens when you put this, if you cook them in the oven, is these burn, all these extra little ones. So they can get pretty black. Okay, I'm almost done these ones. So temporarily, I'm going to put this in here, and I'm going to season them when I have the real garlic and the parsley cut up. Okay, potatoes. I am going to do two things with potatoes. I'm going to cook some in a glass container, and I'm going to boil some because I run out of potatoes quicker, because since I'm not eating pastas and rice and other breads and grains, then I'm eating more potatoes. But I don't eat a lot of potatoes, but I like to have it with every meal. And the first day you make the roast potatoes always tastes best, and after that, day 2 or 3, the roast potatoes just don't taste as good. Mashed potatoes I can cook, and those taste good 5-6 days later. So I do boiled potatoes, which I can pan fry and make hash browns. So half of them I'm gonna, half of them I'm gonna boil, and half of them I'm gonna roast. Now I have not washed these first. I'm going to cut out anything that doesn't look that great. Cut out the little eyes. I think they call that the eyes when you would put this in the garden. It will grow from that place. So I'm just cutting off all the parts that don't look the greatest. And then I'm going to wash them. Cut off those eyes. And there we go. It's really, really hard to get potatoes to look perfect because of how they grow in the ground. And I always think, well, that little bump, it was going around a rock or something, you know, like it's not perfect. The soil that they're grown in, that's a lot of times why they're bumpy, is it? I've seen carrots like that where they've had to grow around something and the carrot will have a wonk. So I always think, oh, well, there was a rock that the potato had to grow around. So they aren't perfect, and there's always dirt. Can't get all the dirt out. I'm pretty sure these are pre-washed. I forget, but it's hard to get all the dirt out. Okay, so half of them are going to be boiled. And as I said in the first part of the video or another video, all of the things I boil, I keep all of that water either for gravy or sauces or soup or stew, anything like that. So I'm just, same principle as I've said with the other things. When you're cutting things up, you want them fairly uniform so that they each cook at the same rate, each piece. If I put this and this together and I tried to boil it, this is going to be overboiled and this would be underboiled. Or, I'd have to cook it a lot, and then this one's going to be, mush. So I'm cutting them into generally bite-sized pieces to boil, and these are easy to eat. It's a bite-sized piece. It's one forkful. That's sort of how I see it. So these will go brown if I don't put them in water. I've been collecting more and more containers because I'm cooking this way. So I try to find glass containers when I'm, bulk cooking, so that because glass doesn't flavor things. I'm not getting residual plastic or anything like that. So these are going to be the ones that are going to be boiled. So they're just bite-sized pieces in general. And then I'm going to show you how to, I found this recipe on Pinterest. Pinterest is my go-to for recipes because everything has a picture, and I love pictures. Let's see, I'm going to use this one. And so it was called potato wedges with cheese or something like that. So that's what I'm going to show you how to make because they're my favorite lately. And okay, so these I'm going to put in water. So I'm cutting those up right at the very end because they will go brown if I don't put them right in the oven, and I'm not quite ready to turn the oven on yet because I haven't brought any of the meats out. So I'm actually going to wait, and I'm going to cut up the onions. So I got to go get my glasses. You will laugh about this. Yep, I got to put these on. But they work. I got them at, they have to be really good seal. I got them at a Home Hardware. I don't know what brand it was. But otherwise, I cry every time, and I'm bawling my eyes out. Even I've tried, getting them cold. I've tried cutting them under running water or starting them off under running water. I'm just very sensitive to it. So you want to take off as many layers as you can because those you can't actually chew. I don't know if you've had that where you try to eat that outside layer and you just can't chew it. Okay. We're getting there. We're getting there. Okay. So for onions, you don't cut all the way through. You just cut with the tip of your knife like that, and then you rock your knife like this and make tiny, tiny, tiny pieces like that. So I'm going almost all the way through. I learned this, when I was like 18 at Cook's College, and I haven't forgotten it. All the way through, and then I rock it. And then when you're almost at the end, then I chop those. Yeah, I feel that outside layer is going to be hard to chew, but we'll see. You do have to waste a little bit of the onion to be able to get to that layer that's easier to eat. If the knife doesn't go through it very easy and sort of slides off, then just take one more layer of the onion off. Okay, pretty uniform. You can always go back through it. Now, my favorite thing to do with onions lately is to fry them up. And now I don't want to take these off yet until I've decided where these are going to go. So some are going to go in there. That's the cabbage. So onions and cabbage take about the same amount of time to cook. And the rest I'm going to actually pan fry because that's my favorite right now. Sometimes I leave it on for a little bit because it's still in the air. There's some dirt. There you go, some dirt water from the potatoes. What else do I need to do? So I think that garlic will be next. We're very close. We're very close. Now garlic, my wrists aren't always strong to use the garlic press. I do have a mini food processor that I've been using lately. This garlic is more frustrating than some smaller pieces. I buy this in bulk, so I get it really, really, really cheap. You know, it turns out to like 10 cents a clove. It's very, very cheap. Well, maybe not that. 20 cents, I meant 20 cents for a head of garlic. Very cheap. So I do waste a little bit because I'm cooking so much of it. So yeah, if you don't want to waste so much because it's more expensive and you don't have a way to get it cheap, I also recommend don't buy pre-cut garlic. I've bought that in the past. Oh, I can feel the onion starting to kick in. Goodness cry. In the past, I have tried buying that pre-cut garlic, but the seasonings, the preservatives, whatever they put in that syrup that it sits in, just totally changes the flavor of the garlic, and I don't like that. So if in doubt, I just take the time and I cut a bunch of it up from scratch like this. But if you don't have access to cheap garlic, like inexpensive garlic, and that's the only option, then maybe rinse it off, you know, like rinse off that oil, or I don't know what it is. But I just didn't like the flavor of it at all. So I'd prefer to take a little bit of time. I listen to lots of podcasts. So I have my, you know, my earbuds in all the time and listen all the time. So I don't mind taking time doing this, also knowing that I'm not going to be cooking for a couple days. So that helps me endure this. If people think, oh, it takes too long to cook. Yeah, it does take a long time to cook, but then I don't have to cook later. And I would much rather make a big mess and also multiply my efforts in that I'm reusing pans. Sometimes, like especially the frying pan, you'll see that I cook multiple things in that. So I got off on a tangent there. I'm trying to think of what I was saying before. Anyways, the garlic, if you can find it at not too expensive a price, it just tastes so much better if you can cut it from scratch. Cut it up yourself like this. Then it will taste better. But if you can't, then go ahead and buy the pre-cut stuff. Now this is assuming that you have access to a nice kitchen. The kitchen I had before we moved to this house was a lot smaller and wasn't as bright. And so this one's great to cook in, but if you have a small kitchen, this is totally doable. And you just have to be a little bit more creative. And maybe you don't have a lot of pots and pans, then you just batch cook, and that you cook one thing and then cook the next thing and then cook the next thing. And it might take 4 hours to cook for 4 days or 5 days instead of 1 hour. This is tedious. I get impatient, so I have to distract myself with, that's like I say, I always am listening to podcasts all the time. So that helps with the boredom, because this is really boring. And so we're getting there. That's 1 clove. So yeah, this is a lot of garlic, and you might think that's a lot, but I'm using it for instead of dried garlic, right? So I have dried garlic that I bought, but you know, I don't necessarily know that it's all 100% dried garlic. Maybe they've got other stuff in there. So this, I know, this is this idea of the one ingredient cooking. I know exactly what's going in the food I'm eating. If you eat out a lot and you don't have access to, you don't want to do this, I'll just talk about that a little bit. If you eat out a lot, which is awesome because you save time, and but you don't know what's going on in the kitchen. You don't know how the food's being prepared. You don't know if they're cooking things that are pre-made, you know, from a package. When I worked at a restaurant way back when, the cheese sauce was just a powder, you know, with lots of chemicals in it. The gravy was just a powder. We mixed it in the water, like nothing. It was not one ingredient, and you didn't know where it was coming from. And so many, but that's what restaurants have to do in order to have the volume. So I understand that, but it's just not. Yeah, you just don't know really what you're eating. So you have to trust, you know. And there's all these food preparation services, which are great when you're busy, but you just don't know what are they cooking? Are they sitting in their, you know, in their big kitchen doing everything from scratch, or are they buying it from a company, a factory that has, you know, produced it in bulk and added a whole pile of chemicals? So I know exactly what's going in this food, you know, because it's one ingredient, and I know what I'm adding. Now, this is 95% of my diet is this way. The other 5%, well, there's a bit of rot. I've never seen rot on them. Usually they just dry out. 95%, or say 90% of my diet is this way. I do eat nuts, I eat dairy, I eat meat, I eat fish, I eat eggs. I'm an omnivore. And so because of that, I get bored with just one ingredient foods and one ingredient meat. So I do have bacon, and I do have sausage and cheese, and all of those things are processed foods. They've all come from a factory, and so they aren't straight from the farm. And so if I say I'm clean, I'm eating clean, it's 90% of the time. To me, this is clean, and that it's one ingredient. There's no added anything to it. It's clean, which is, that's a weird word to use for clean. I've actually heard of clean keto and dirty keto. I hate that. Why would I say, oh, I'm eating dirty this week? That just sounds awful. So I don't like that phrase. Whoever came up with that, I think you could have thought of another phrase, but I think it's meaning, you know, are you 100% doing it, or are you cheating? But I don't like the idea of dirty. So it's like, to me, it's like, well, 90% of the time I'm eating one ingredient foods, and the other 10% I'm eating processed foods. That's basically the logical wording. You know, it's not putting any shame on anything and just saying one's bad or one's good. It's, you know, one is processed and one is not processed. One's in the factory, and a company is earning money off of that food that is being produced in the factory. The farmers are earning money off of the food that is the one ingredients. Unfortunately, the farmers don't earn enough money, and that's a really sad part of most of our societies, that the farmers don't earn the money they should for the amount of work that they do. But I won't get political on this video. Anyways, so here we are. We're done all of our garlic. And yes, as you can see, I've thrown a little bit of these ends off. You can pick them out if you want. I keep seeing reels online of quicker ways to cut garlic out. I don't know how they do it. It's like magic, because I can't ever make those. I can't ever reproduce that. So now I'm going to wash my knife off and show you how to cut these, to mince these without a mincer. So this is 2 bunches of garlic, lots of cloves. And so I'm using this knife that has the rounded edge so that I can rock it back and forth. I'm keeping my hand on top. I'm not going to cut myself that way, and it helps put some pressure down. And it's sort of rotating it around like this. I learned this back in cooking college over 3 decades ago. and it's something I never forgot how to do. You can do this for anything you're wanting to mince. Like if you're wanting to mince onions, it basically acts the same way. So I'm just cutting it smaller and smaller. Round and round I go. If your knife is totally straight, just keep your other hand away and then just go like that. Like if you aren't able to rock it, then you can sort of still do it. So yeah, when my wrist is hurting, because I've had carpal tunnel in the past, so certain things like the garlic press can hurt my wrist when I'm doing that much. If I'm just doing one clove, then it's fine, but this is a lot of garlic. And this lasts for at least a week or two. And so what I'll show you is how I fry it up, and then I put it in a container, and then I can just sprinkle it on anything that I want to put it on. And I'm going to be adding it to a few other things. So it's getting there. When it's close, then this is what I learned how to do, is you add a little bit of salt. And the salt has some grip to it. Of course, whatever you're going to be adding this to is totally fine that you have the salt. So I'm going to press down. I don't know if you can see this. I'm pressing down. And so the salt helps give it some grip. And so as I'm going along the edge of the knife is also helping to mince it. So I'm pushing down and sort of pushing the edge of the knife along, and the salt helps to grind it into smaller pieces. You can hear the salt. It wasn't very much salt, because whatever you're adding this to, you're going to be already seasoning anyway. So, but that's how to mince it, is sort of pushing down. I'm okay with a few bigger chunks. And of course it shrinks a tiny bit when you're cooking it too. So I'm pushing down with this hand on top. I have never yet found a mincer that works super well, because they squeeze out the sides and it doesn't get it all down. The last one I have is the best one I've had so far. This one here. But even still, as you push it down, some stuff squeezes out the side. So they haven't invented a perfect one. Anyways, I don't mind doing it by hand, like I have mentioned before. I'm always listening to podcasts, so I don't mind taking this time out. There we go. That's a lot of garlic. So I'm going to put it in a little bowl for later. This is one of these things that I'm going to be frying up in my big pan. This is the winter here, and tomatoes are so expensive compared to other foods. So I treat them with special care. But my favorite way to have tomatoes lately has been added to the pan fry mix, which is this one. I know they cook faster, but when they're in the oven, they seem to be fine for that. Now, the rest of this, I'm actually going to use probably in, I can use it with fried scrambled eggs. So in order to make it not go dry in the fridge, I can just actually put it in this like that, and it will stay fine. Okay, so that one's going to be fried. I haven't added the oil to this batch yet. This is this mixture with the zucchini. I'm going to add a little bit of the onions and a little bit of the garlic and some parsley. There's not really any rhyme or reason in order to all of this that I'm doing. I just sort of get in the zone and see what I feel like mixing and matching with. A little bit of onions, because those don't actually cook as fast, and those other things cook, so I don't want them tasting like raw onions in there. So the parsley's next. So you can keep parsley on your counter, and I'm going to use about a third of this today. And just cut it off, but yeah, you put it in water, keep it on your counter. So I washed it off, squeezed out the extra. I don't normally cut off the edges, and this is basically what we did, like what we did with the garlic. We're just chopping it into very, very small pieces. Eating this way is worth it. If you're willing to learn a little bit about how to cook, if you can, if you're able to, physically able to, and you have the space and the ability to do this, it really, I recommend it for everybody. I feel so much better when I eat this way. Basically all my ailments go away. And as I've mentioned in other videos, my hair has gotten thicker, my skin has cleared up. All of these things that I've had to deal with over the years, like my skin especially, I've never had as good a skin as I do since I started eating these one ingredient foods. I feel so much better. Now that it's cut up, I'm going to add a little bit of this parsley to here. I'm going to add a little bit of this parsley to the cabbage mixture. That's going to be fried. What else do I want to add this to? And a little bit to, actually I'm going to add this to the cauliflower at the end. So I'm going to put this, this does use up a lot of dishes, as you can see, but then you're not going to have to cook for a couple days, 3-4 days. Thankfully I have a dishwasher. There's been decades where I never had dishwasher, especially in Brazil, so I got used to washing everything by hand, which is a pain, but if you have to do it, you have to do it. So now that we have a dishwasher, it's awesome. The next thing, or almost the last thing that we have to do, is the potatoes, garlic cheese wedges. So I'm cutting them to be, oh, there's a piece that's black. I'm going to make them into wedges. So I slice them along like this. This is where I've cut myself in the past, so I got to be careful. Because my goal is to have them fairly uniform, as I've mentioned in the other videos, where the more uniform they are, the more easily they will cook evenly. So you won't have one that's undercooked and one that's overcooked. And so basically you're going to go along like this and slice them into wedges. Not perfect. If you see that green, I've heard before that that's poisonous. I've only gotten food poisoning once in my life. They do say that the green part of a potato is poisonous. I don't know if it is. Sometimes it means that it's gotten exposed to light. So if you have potatoes, keep them in a dark place. So if I do see it's like more green, I'll sort of like take some of that part away. But I haven't noticed any, feeling sick from any of that. The only time I ever got food poisoning, we lived in Brazil for 8.5 years when we were missionaries, and we were missionaries for 15 years, but 8.5 of them were in Brazil. And they loved their potato salad. It was delicious potato salad. It had raw onions in it, eggs and potatoes and raw onions, and that just made all the difference. I haven't made it for years, and of course mayonnaise. And it's really hot where we were in the Amazon area, so that restaurant didn't have, I guess, good enough, refrigeration or whatever. But yeah, we got sick from that. But one of the reasons why I haven't gotten food poisoning is because, as I've talked about, I went to professional cooks training right out of high school. I was 18, and one of the first courses or parts of the course was food safety in order to work at a restaurant. And basically, if in doubt, throw it out was their mantra. And so I do tend to throw out food that I am suspicious of, but like I said, I've only gotten food poisoning once in my life. I do throw out, well, you see how much food I'm throwing out here. This, of course, isn't related to food poisoning. But if there's food in the fridge, I will eat leftovers for up to 5 days. especially chicken, not past 5 or 6 days, maybe at the max, and always heating up for very, very, very hot, like hot to the touch, so it's steaming. And yeah, I really, really heat things up. Like in a soup, I'll heat it up for boiling for 10 minutes usually. They recommend that. Anyways, that was a bit off topic, but no, I guess I was talking about the yellow part of potatoes. Now, what I'm going to do, this actually does taste better when I use the pan. So I'm going to do it the way I did it the first time around, and that did taste the best. So I'm going to get some parchment paper. Now you can use aluminum foil too. So I'm going to put a little bit of oil down here. I'm going to just spread that around. Now I haven't tried it in this gas stove. Like I said, I was using like I said in my other videos, I was using an electric oven up until a few months ago, and then we moved to this new place. So we'll see how this works in the gas oven. Run out of containers, so I'm going to actually use this one to mix it in. So I'm going to pour a little bit of olive oil in here because I want every single side of it to be covered. Now there is a little bit of water. I think I've made too many potatoes. I'll cut that one off. And these ones, I can always put them in the fridge. Even though I've nicked them off, I can put them in the fridge, and next week when I'm cooking potatoes again, I can use them then. I had a friend who used to have a food truck, and he would sell French fries, and he said he kept all of his potatoes in the fridge. Well, I don't have enough room because as you see, I cook a lot of vegetables, and so I empty the fridge out every week or two, and then I have to fill it all up again. So I would not have room for all my potatoes. So I'm going to add, I'm going to add a little bit of that fresh garlic to there, not too much, a little bit to there. And then I'm going to add probably the equivalent of 2 cloves probably to there. This is what makes it taste so good. Salt and pepper. If you don't have fresh garlic, you can use powdered garlic. Some salt. Remember, you can use more salt if you eat one ingredient foods because nobody else is adding the salt for you. And our body needs salt. So as you can see, I'm mixing it all up. I think I'm going to need a little bit more olive oil. You don't want too much because then it sort of smothers them and they aren't actually able to cook as well. There's sort of a bit of a art to this. I have not perfected the recipe, and like you see, I'm not following any recipes exactly. I did read the recipe for this one at the beginning, and basically it's what I'm doing here. It's not, you can't really go wrong. The only way to go wrong is to burn them. That's basically the only way for it to go wrong. Because you want these actually to be flat. That's part of the best part about it, is that they each can brown on the bottom. If you have an aluminum pan or a pan that's brand spanking new, that's non-stick, you could do this directly on the pan. It will fry better. These are not going to get probably quite as brown. I might even have too many, but they all got a touch. That's the goal. They don't have to go the same way, but it looks prettier. So we're getting there. That one's going to, you see that one's a bit thicker than the other ones specifically, so it might not cook all the way through, but, well, no, we will definitely make sure they cook all the way through. It just means the other ones might get too brown. You don't want any undercooked. Better to have a few overcooked than any of them undercooked. Undercooked potatoes are chewy and don't taste very good. There we go. So, and that one actually, yeah, that one's too big. Okay, those are ready to go. I don't follow recipes very much for cooking. I always have followed recipes for baking. No, that's not true. I get the hang of it and then I improvise. I'm rebellious. I don't like to. I was raised in a very, very strict environment, and so anytime I can change the rules or whatever, I like to do that. So that's one reason why I don't like following recipes. But then the problem with not following recipes is you can't repeat it. Because if I really liked that, I'm not going to know the exact proportion of oil and garlic, etc. If I really like this, if I haven't followed a recipe, I can't repeat it. So that's the downside, but to me that's the upside in that it's fun to figure it out. So what I'm looking at here is how many things I'm going to have in the oven, because I have 2 racks. I have 3 racks, but the top one is way too close to the flame. So I have to be able to make sure that I can cook all of these pretty much at the same time to maximize or to minimize the amount of time that the oven is on and to maximize the amount of space. So I know I had originally had something that was going to be planned for this, but I'm estimating the amount of space. Okay, no, so I've got this on one level, and I've got the beans and the carrots on the other level. I'm just going to actually see if I can put 2 of these back to back. So I'm just about ready to start cooking, except for the meat. So I'm going to start talking about the meat a little bit right now. I am an omnivore, so if you are following this and you are a vegetarian or a vegan or a carnivore, I have personally not tried any of those. I have always been an omnivore, and so that is what I'm teaching and showing you about right now. So I do eat eggs, and I eat meat, and I eat fish, and I eat chicken. I don't eat fish very often. I haven't found a good way to cook it that it's not too strong. I'm a picky eater, and I don't like the strong meat. So I'm not going to show you how to cook fish this time. I do like salmon a lot, and fish and chips, of course. But I don't have fish all that often. I probably should have it more, but I don't. So I'm going to show you how to make eggs where the peel comes off really easy. I just learned this from watching a reel, and it works really well. I'm going to cook, I'll just show you all the stuff that I'm going to cook. This is bone broth. This is a frozen chicken breast, and this is cut up sausage. I bought it in bulk and cut it up, put it in the freezer. And under here, I've been thawing a roast. So this is, and I have bacon. Bacon's over here. So I have all of these that I'm going to cook today, plus the 1 ingredient foods. So these are all 1 ingredient foods, except for the bacon and sausage have been prepared in a factory, and they have added, chemicals, etc. That's my cheat. If you want to see it as cheat or whatever, that's where it's like 90% clean, 10% not clean. If we want to see the clean food, whatever. So it's not technically a 1 ingredient food, but I like variety, and that's what's made this work so well to stay on this, healthy diet and to keep my 80 pounds off, is to have variety. If I don't have variety, I feel deprived, and then I want to go back to my old way of eating. So part of that was making sure that I have a lot of variety in the healthy foods that I'm eating. So so there's lots of proteins in that. So the chicken, I'm going to thaw. I'm going to cut it into small pieces, and I'm going to stir fry that. This I'm going to fry up. So those are both on the top of the stove. This is on the top of the stove. And then the roast is going to be in the slow cooker, which is over there. Now I cooked up bone broth. Now this looks pretty funny, probably. Bone broth I get at the butcher. I get bones for a really good price, this butcher shop nearby. And I cook it in the slow cooker, and I cook it for about 8 to 10 hours. In the past, I have cooked bone broth for 24 hours, but then the house smells like that for 24 hours. So this happened to be very congealed. So as soon as I'm done with the slow cooker, I strain it, put it in the fridge overnight in one of these pans with the lid on. I skim off the fat, throw the fat away. I know you could use the fat if you wanted to. I don't. But what's left, it was very congealed, which means it has a lot of collagen, which is super healthy. Maybe that helps with my thicker hair too. And so it was very, like, I couldn't pour it into my ice cube tray, which I usually do. And then I put it in the fridge for a couple hours till it's frozen, take it out, put it in a bag, do a repeat and repeat and repeat until all of it is in ice cube size. So then what I can do is when I'm cooking stir fry, this is bone broth, I can take a chunk. So what I had to do was scoop it out and I put it on a cookie sheet, put it back until it was solid. Because otherwise you'll have bone broth, like how are you going to be able to use it? You can make a pot of soup with your bone broth and then you've basically used it all up. This way I'm able to use it in pieces. So I can take the bone broth, put it into the stir fry when I'm cooking that. Put it into, I could put it in there, but I want that to be more fried. I could put it into that. That will help. It will just bring nutrients, more nutrients. They say bone broth's about 10 times more nutrients than actual meat. So super healthy. And this had so much collagen in it. So it's very chunky. So I'm going to use this at the bottom of the roast. At the bottom, it will melt a little bit in the bottom. This will cook for about 7 hours. I'm going to throw these in there too. I could throw some more things. I will just strain it out and it will become the gravy. So it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to be putting that in here and not too much because I don't need a lot of gravy. So it's like 5 cubes worth because this has fat on it and this is going to come off. Now, sometimes I'll roll this in oil, put it in a bowl, put some oil in it, roll it, and put spices on top. Or sometimes I'll just literally put it straight in there and then as it thaws. So this is going to take about 7 hours to cook because it's totally frozen. And I'm putting the fat up so that the fat drips down into the meat. That is a full, at Costco, you can buy 2 together. That's a full one. A lot of times I'll cut that in half and then the other one in half. So I have 4 half sizes. If there's not as many people in the house to eat it, but there's more people in the house. And so we're going to probably go through that in 4 or 5 days, plus the other meat too. Putting this back in the freezer. The chicken, I'm going to leave for now because I got a lot of other stuff to do. I'll probably cook it at the very end. This I can cook at any point in time. So the other thing, the last prep is the bacon. Now I have been cooking bacon for a long time. Actually, that's not true. I didn't actually hardly cook bacon up until I was 40 and learned about the paleo diet, or no, 42. So over a decade. So for bacon, anyways, I've been cutting it in half. I find it curls too much and it's too hard to cook in a pan. So I've been doing this for a long time now where I cut it in half. And then if I want to cook it, I just do it in pieces in the pan. But lately, it's a pain because you have to stand there and flip it, or you put it in the oven and then it just doesn't taste the same. So I've been actually making large bacon bits. They're about, I don't know, that's 3/4 of an inch, half an inch. And then just cooking them in this great big pan, and I can sort of put it on and I don't have to do as much like maintenance to cook it. And then I can put it on top of things, mix it with scrambled eggs. I can put it on top of potatoes, on top of the vegetables, and it just brings in a little variety, brings in a little bit of taste, and has some crunch. If you are mostly eating one ingredient foods, that's super healthy, and there's so few preservatives. Like there's no preservatives. This is where the preservatives are. This is where the chemicals are. So if you're eating healthy, have a little bit of enjoyment and have some fun and have some bacon. That's what I recommend. It will make the diet much more sustainable long term. And for me, there's no food off limits as long as it's outside of the house in terms of the foods that are really tempting to me. The foods that are in the house are foods like this and a little bit of fun food, like I say before, where there's risky food, fun food, you can cheat food, whatever you want to call it. But no food is off limits for me so that I don't feel deprived and then I crave it because it's like, I can't have it, I want it more. But it's outside of the house, or the 2-bite rule, where I talk about in some of my other videos, where if I know they're very tempting to me, I'll just have 2 bites. And the first 2 bites of anything always taste the best anyways. So this is the 10%. 90% clean, 1 ingredients. This has got some chemicals in it, but tastes pretty good. And it's the amount that you eat of that is very, very small anyways. Same with this. This has got chemicals in it. I don't have, these are farmer sausage. So you buy a lot. I cut it up into portions, and then I can fry it up, put it in the freezer, fry it up later. So those 2 things are the only processed foods so far in this meal prep. The next thing we're going to do is start cooking. This is butter also. So I usually only use olive oil and butter in my cooking, and whatever fat would come off in these types of things. I've added 1 inch or so of water, and where is it here? Here's the steamer. So I remember having this when I was growing up, and my mom would steam vegetables in it. So the 1 inch of water just barely comes to the bottom of that. When I start the stove on, I'm going to bring that to a boil and then put the eggs in and then start the timer for 14 minutes and with the lid on. Then when it's done, I take it, put it in the sink, let the cold water go on it for probably 2 or 3 minutes. Let it sit in cold water for about 10 or 15 minutes. And then I put the lid on. So it's just egg. I pour the water out. It's just the cooked eggs. They're fairly cool. And I shake it, and it just totally separates out the eggshell. It's pretty amazing. So this is going to be for the bacon. These pans I'm probably not going to use. I just brought them out. Sometimes I'll scramble eggs when I'm doing my 1 ingredient cooking. So in my other video, I talked about how I use cast iron. In order to get iron, I don't usually take supplements, vitamin supplements. I don't necessarily trust them. I'd rather get it from food if we can. And so I wash my pans, I scrape them out. I wash them with a regular scraper. I want to have some of that iron come in my body. It always will rust. Before I just start cooking again, I will wash it 1 more time to get rid of that top layer of rust. But I'm not one of these people that and this goes back to my cooking school days, where it's like you never would not clean that's a double negative. You always cleaned your pans. Whereas some people, they will only just lightly wash their pan, and I don't trust that there's residual food left over. So that's just the way I'd rather clean everything really well with soap and water, which is what I do. So I'm going to wash this out. I'm going to turn the oven on, and it's going to get a little louder because I want the fan to be working, and I have to open a window too so that I have ventilation. So that's what I'm going to do next. So this is a cabbage stir fry that I'm making. I find the cabbage stir fry sort of is, to me, I'm treating it like as if I had noodles or rice. It's fairly neutral flavored, I find, and it's mixed with other stuff. So I'm just going to fry it a little bit longer. If it's too fried, it doesn't taste actually as good when it's fried too long. This is the eggs. The water has boiled, and so I'm going to be adding these eggs at the top, and then I'll set the timer for 14 minutes. So that's half a dozen eggs. I put the lid on. I set my timer for 14 minutes. And that's the only thing I actually set timer for. Otherwise, I'm just conscious of what's going in. And because I'm not leaving the room, because it's a gas stove, I am going to be here all the time pretty much. Before I turned the video back on, I had put the carrots and the vegetable medley in there already. I'm preheating the oven, so I've actually jump started and put them in there before the oven is completely hot, which I've discovered I can do, and those ones don't go too brown. Like if you put stuff into the oven while it's preheating, especially with that electric oven I used to have, it would just get too hot. Whereas I'm finding with the gas oven, it's not getting it too hot too fast. The preheat takes a while. So this is the, it's okay to use the metal scraper because I'm not minding that the iron is, some of the iron is coming off into the food. I had added that little tiny bit of bone broth that you saw me add to that. So that's adding a little bit of moisture. I might actually add a little bit of butter. So I have about a cup of butter here that I'm going to be using. I'm going to add a little bit of butter to that. It'll make it taste a little better. Butter makes things taste better. I think I would classify butter as a processed food because I bet that there's more than just butter in it. So I will count butter in with the category of the bacon and the sausage because it's been made in a factory. So we've got that cooking. When that's done, I have all of these things ready to replace it. So like I say, I'm trying to be efficient with the gas, with the heat of the oven, and with the least amount of time cooking. So I know I could have all the burners on. In this particular house, when I use the front burners, any smoke seems to set the fire alarms off. So I'm just using the back two burners. But yeah, if you had a stove that you can have all the burners on, as long as you can keep up with it all, because I got lots of things going on, lots of things cooking at the same time. As long as you can keep up with them and nothing's really burning. If you have two things you're frying, sometimes it can get a little bit overwhelming. So this seems to work well that I can keep up with things. I've got a pan ready. That's going to go in. When that's done, I'm going to fry the cauliflower or wash it out and fry the garlic. I like garlic cooked in a clean pan so that it doesn't stick as much. This is almost ready. That is one nice thing about the gas stove is it cooks super hot. You can see this is starting to cook. Might need to cook it another minute or two. I don't know if it was completely boiling. So I still have to add the potatoes in the oven. It's at 349. I want to get it up to 390 this time. I'm wiping off the bottom of the glass because water and glass and heat, I have broken dishes in the past. Well, that's not true. I've never broken a glass dish in the oven. I broke one trying to make a double boiler. Okay, so I'm putting it on the bottom shelf along with this because I want these to get really, really, really hot and brown. So I'm putting them on the bottom shelf. I'm wiping the bottom of the pan before I put it in. So that's on the bottom shelf. So there's 4 things in there right now. So that's efficient. Okay, so this is almost done. Smells good. I don't think I put any seasoning other than the parsley. I'm going to add a little bit more parsley. There's a lot of flavors in there, so. And with the bone broth isn't usually too strong, but it will add a little bit of flavor. So I'm going to take this off now, and I'm going to replace it with the bacon. Because I'm cooking the cauliflower in next, it's okay that it's not totally clean. But I don't want this to catch on fire, the stuff that came off the edge. It's such a big pan. So I'm going to cook the cauliflower in mostly butter, because that makes it taste good. Because cauliflower doesn't have a lot of flavor. I'm going to add a bit of the garlic to the Brussels sprouts. Those are also going to be pan fried. So I have 2 things ready to pan fry, plus the sausage. So I'm going to do this next. There wasn't any seasoning in that. It was just the cauliflower and the butter. And so I'm just going to cook them until they are finished cooking, which they change color when they're done. I am also going to make a cheese sauce, I think, later, because the cheese sauce will taste good with the Brussels sprouts, or you can use mayonnaise or garlic sauce. Add garlic to mayonnaise. Mayonnaise is also not a true clean food, one ingredient food, because there's chemicals in it, but I'm not too picky about that because I have so much other food that's very healthy. The broccoli always tastes good with cheese sauce too. I did buy some steak spice at the bulk food store. I'm going to add a tiny bit of flavoring to this. I know it's supposed to be for steak. Oh, that just says that the oven's heated up to 390. Just a little bit of spices. This cauliflower is pretty bland. You can see it starting to change color. Getting a little bit almost green, yellowy green. So I finished the cauliflower, put it in the pan, and now I have the Brussels sprouts cooking a little low because the garlic was starting to brown too much. And so I'm just frying those in a little bit of oil and a tiny bit of water so it's partially steaming. Stuff in the oven is doing great. Hopefully you can hear the sizzle. You can see the carrots are almost done. They're starting to curl. So the carrots are definitely done. They're curling up and some of them have got a little brown. I took the eggs off the stove and I have them in cold water with some ice. And I will show you what they do when I put the lid on. I drain the water out, put the lid on, and then I'll shake them. I've got the lid on. And I've just started to shake them and you can start to see what they look like. It's going to be a little noisy. Do you see? Isn't this amazing? So I have to take them out to make sure that the peels aren't getting embedded. But I don't know what it is. It's like magic, and it's the steaming, and they just peel off. So handy. And then I rinse them off to get the rest of the peels off. Doesn't work perfectly every time. This one's sort of come apart a bit more. It's roughly 14 minutes that I cook these, but you got to make sure it's really boiling at the beginning, and then it helps to have the ice. I don't always have ice. I just have cold water. But yeah, it goes pretty fast, and then I just rinse those off. Pretty cool. I've done the Brussels sprouts. They're finished. The bacon I keep putting back and forth and to keep using up the burner. Sweet potatoes are almost done. Carrots are done. So the potatoes are cooking very nicely, and they're like browning on the bottom very nicely. So the next thing I do for the potatoes is I grate cheese on top, and then I put it back in the oven just to melt the cheese. You can already have it pre-grated. I forgot to have it already grated ahead of time. So this makes the potatoes cool down a tiny bit because they're out of the oven. But it will probably be fine. These taste best when they're eaten right away, but they also are okay for another day heating them up. Now I had switched the vegetable medley around. I'm putting it in the middle. The beans are still in there. Putting this on the bottom for about maybe a minute or two. I've already turned the oven off, so it's still hot in there. So this is another way to not use up any more maximum amount of energy that we can. The sweet potatoes are coming along, and I can put my fork in them. That's how I know they're done. Now I don't have the potatoes ready. I need another pan. Put the potatoes in for them to boil, so I'm just going to turn that off for now. Now I'm going to keep that. I'm going to strain out the liquid and keep that liquid for soup. So the broccoli's done. I ended up just cooking it in the leftover water from the sweet potatoes. The beans are done. They're roasted. I'm in the middle of cooking the bacon. As you can see, it's almost done. I like crispy bacon, so it's just frying up in here. I find this super easy because I don't have to be flipping it, and it cooks fairly quickly this way. Don't want to cook it too much. Put the lid back on at an angle, turning it down a bit. The potatoes turned out amazing. Cheese melted on top. And so those are done. The Brussels sprouts were all done. I'm just about ready to start cooking the garlic after the bacon is done. The potatoes, I added a few, I used fresh water and hot water and added a bit of the bone broth cubes from the freezer. So that will give them a bit more flavor and nutrients. So the bacon is done and crispy, and I've just poured it out here onto a paper towel, and there's actually quite a lot of bacon fat. Sometimes I save it and then use it in future baking, but not always. So that one's done. The garlic, I use about, I'm guessing, a tablespoon of olive oil, and I cook it not too hot because it can burn, and I want it to be evenly cooked. So I had scraped out the pan after the Brussels sprouts. Still have the mixed medley in the oven. It's not cooking super fast because there's a lot of moisture in all of those vegetables, and I want them to brown a bit. I've also turned it down to 350. After the garlic is cooked, then I'm going to do the onions. After the onions are cooked, then I'm going to do the spinach and then the sausage. So it's one after another in this great big pan. So I just keep cooking this until it's medium brown. So the vegetable medley is almost done. They're starting to shrivel a little bit. I finished the garlic, so that's what it looks like. And then I've got the onions now that I'm frying. I just wiped out the pan after the garlic. Put the onions in, I didn't wash it. So the vegetable medley turned out great. The potatoes are still boiling. The onions are almost done cooking. The onions are done. I just scraped them out. I didn't make the pan too perfect. And then I threw all the rest of the spinach in there. Now we'll cook for about 2 minutes. So I'm back again. I took a little break, cleaned everything up, put all of the cooked items into containers, put them in the fridge, and we ended up eating some of the potatoes because they were so good at that point in time, and a little bit of everything else. The only other things that we need to cook tonight is the chicken and then making cheese sauce. I'm going to actually add a chunk of the bone broth for the cheese sauce. I think it will add a tiny bit of flavor to it. So I've cut up the chicken breast. It's just one chicken breast, and I'm going to put it in a bowl, and then I'm going to add a little bit of lemon juice. I don't cook with lemon that often, but this was on sale, and I wanted to buy some for water. So I'm going to add a little bit of lemon juice, some pepper, and some of that steak sauce, which is weird to add it to chicken, but I think it's going to have a little bit of a zip to it. So here's the steak sauce. Sometimes I add taco seasoning to chicken. I think that tastes good too. So a little bit of pepper. Because I don't follow recipes very often, as I mentioned in a previous video, and I can't replicate it if it tastes really good. That's one reason to follow recipes, but I like to experiment. So a little bit of the lemon with the seasoning. I washed this in between because I took a few hours intermission. I washed that out because the last thing I was cooking was the sausage. I didn't cook it too much. I decided to just basically heat it up, cook it a little bit. So I'm going to be cooking now the chicken in there, and then I'm going to be cooking the cheese sauce. I'm going to add some salt, a little bit more pepper. So once this is cooked up, and I show you how to meal prep, ideas for meal prepping, basically mix and matching so that every day isn't too boring. or you don't get bored, then this will go with any of the combinations of foods that we have here, and also with the boiled potatoes. So I had washed this out. It had started to rust again. That's okay. I'm going to add a fair amount of the olive oil. I could add butter, but if you cook butter too hot, then it starts to burn. If you make ghee, so sometimes I'll take a whole pound of butter and I'll heat it very low on the stove to make ghee. And what happens is it separates out. The skim milk goes to the bottom, the fat's in the middle, and the top is this sort of crunchy, salty part. So I think that's what's actually burning off when you cook butter. I don't know. Maybe it's the skim milk. And then what I do is I put it into ice cube trays. And once it's separated out, then I just keep the part that's the fat. And then I have chunks of that, and I'll put it like in a Ziploc bag, and that's handy to use. Okay, so we're just cooking. It's a little dark out, so hopefully the light is okay right now. It got dark while I took a break. Just gonna cook up this chicken. I'm putting it fairly high because I want it to brown. Now, when you're making cheese sauce, you make a roux. So we're gonna use butter, and then we're gonna add flours. This, as you'll notice, this is the only grains. I think the only grains that I know of. There's maybe a bit of grains that they use in sausage in order to make it all stick together. So that's an example of what grains do, is they stick things together. I'm going to use the butter. I'm going to cook not a huge amount of cheese sauce, but I'm going to use a fair amount of butter. So on this low carb diet that I eat, I do not measure micronutrients, macronutrients, all of that kind of thing, but I do try to not limit the amount of butter, but I'm not specifically eating a stick of butter. But when I cook with butter, I'm not limiting it. So it tastes good. I used to never cook with butter. I used to only use margarine because I believed the messaging that margarine was healthier for you. But since 2012, I have never used margarine. So I'm just gonna fry this up. I'm only using these 2 burners right now, as I said, because as soon as I start using these, our fire alarm goes off. It's super sensitive. I guess I could move the fire alarm. In order to make the cheese sauce, I melt the butter, and then I'm going to use a scoop. In general, it's equal portions of butter to flour. When I first learned how to do this in cooking school, I want it to be a bit buttery, so I'm going to use a little bit less flour than that. And I want it to be thin enough in order to put into the meal prep containers. And so if it's too thick, as it cools, it evaporates and it gets thicker and thicker, and then you got this little blob to put on top. But also if it's too buttery, then it acts like hollandaise sauce and it separates. But hollandaise sauce is delicious. I'll have to do a video on how to make hollandaise sauce. It's super simple. Actually, while I'm waiting, I'll tell you. It's so simple. You get a pan like that one that I used for the chicken. So it makes a double boiler. Put a little bit of water in that. Put the pan on top. Separate 4 eggs. So you crack them. You put the yolk in one side, the white in the other side of a container. The one that you're going to put the yolks in can be this metal basin. So you boil the water. You put the pan with the yolks. You get a whisk. And it cooks very, very fast. So you're whisking the egg yolks. But before that, I'm just trying to do it off the top of my head. I haven't made it for quite a while. You have melted butter or the ghee, ideally the ghee, which means the salts have been separated and the skim milk has been separated out. So it's just the fat. So when you are mixing that with the egg yolk, it's not too runny. Sometimes I'll just melt butter, but it's got that skim milk part to it. And so it makes the hollandaise sauce a bit too runny. And that's the point of the hollandaise sauce, is it's a sauce. It's not just runny. Anyways, so you've got the melted ghee. You got the pan with the water. You've got the basin, metal basin with the egg yolks, 4 egg yolks. You put it on that boiling water. You start to whisk it. and then you slowly pour the melted butter on top. And it's about 15 seconds, 20 seconds, maybe not even that. Very, very fast, and you just keep whisking as you see it start to thicken. Then you immediately take it off the boiling water because it just heats up way too fast. That's how I make it. Sometimes I'll add some mustard. I think hollandaise sauce usually has mustard in it. I forget. If I haven't separated out the butter and I'm just using straight, complete melted butter that has all of the salts and the skim milk in it, then that's enough salt. Otherwise, I'll add salt and pepper after. But it's basically butter and egg yolk mixed together at a high heat, and it congeals, and it's I think the word is emulsifying the fat with the egg yolk, and it tastes delicious. Now, I used to love eggs Benedict for breakfast. Now that I'm intermittent fasting, I eat breakfast very rarely. Then I would have that as a main meal or a dinner meal. And so, but that's also got the bread, the English muffin. So I guess making the cheese sauce is one way to still have the enjoyment of the sauce. I know it has a little bit of flour, but hollandaise sauce does not reheat well. Like, it's good that time and that's it. So you can chop them open and see if any of them are pink inside. You want to cook them, but not overcook it. Smells delicious. And the potatoes, sometimes I can undercook them and turn it off and they'll keep cooking a little bit longer. Okay, so the chicken's done. All my containers are pretty full. So I'm gonna, for now, just put it over here. And I'm going to check the potatoes by putting a fork in them actually to see if the fork goes in smoothly, then they're done. And it did. I'm going to turn those off. So now putting the butter up here to melt. Now I'm going to just get a clean spoon, put it in my flour. This is actually whipping cream, but you can use milk and you can use regular cream, depends on how thick you want it. And if you are into the low carb, high fat diet, I don't emphasize the high fat as much because I'm eating nuts, I'm eating high fat dairy, I'm eating cheese, I'm eating bacon, I'm eating sausage, I'm eating eggs. I'm not purposely adding more fat to my diet. Butter browns very fast if you aren't watching it, and then it definitely changes the flavor. Now, when you're making a roux is the base of pretty much any sauce. So I'm going to add about that much flour because I want it to thicken, but I don't want it to be too thick. This is what it's looking like. So you can actually brown that a bit on purpose, and it will flavor it. It will give it a little bit of a roast, more of a roast flavor, or yeah, browned butter flavor. But I don't have to do that. So I'm going to add this cream first. So that's the butter and the flour. Now, if the roux is hot and you add cold liquid, it shouldn't have lumps. If they both are the same temperature, it's more likely to have lumps. So it emulsifies. So all of the flour and the cream and the butter is all one texture. I could have grated the cheese, but I didn't feel like washing my grater again. So I'm going to add this chunk of bone broth. There's very, not a lot of strong flavor to the bone broth because I literally only use bones. I don't add other vegetables while I'm cooking it, or salt or pepper, but it will just give a little bit more flavor overall. So the cheese I'm going to add, and you want it to melt but not boil too long because it can separate a little bit. If I need a little bit more liquid, I can always just add a little bit more cream or even some water. Mixing the cream, the flour, the bone broth, and the cheese. I'll be honest, I've never actually added bone broth in the past. I would have added milk to thin it out a bit, but when I have it on hand, when I have room in my freezer, because it makes a lot when I cook the bones. You don't have to do it that much, but when I do it, I, use probably 3 bones worth, and it's almost that full of water. So it fills up almost 2 pans worth when it's done. So I have to have room for all that in the freezer because I can't use it all at once. I guess I could if I was making soups or stews, but I just like to have it on hand. Now, because I use the straight butter and not ghee, then the salts are in there, and butter is fairly salty. I only ever buy the salted butter since salt is good. Salt is good as long as you aren't eating processed foods, because you need salt, and none of these in their raw form had salt. And so you have to add it in because our body needs some salt for electrolytes. Okay, so you can see what this is looking like. It's nice. You don't have to use cheddar cheese. I could have used the Monterey Jack. It just would have been a white cheese sauce then. So I'm just wanting it just to get up to the stage where the cheese melts. Texture looks good. I remember in cooking class for gravies, they'd say dip the spoon in and you put your finger across it, and if it starts dripping down from the top, it's a good gravy. So this wouldn't be a good gravy because it's not dripping down enough. It's too thick. But for cheese sauce, that's okay. Okay, so it's just about melted. Now, I made sauce the other week with just butter and cream, no flour, and it turned out pretty good. You have to sort of boil it down to thicken it. So I don't always add flour, but I do once in a while. The little bit of carbs, a little bit of processed grains that I do eat once in a while. And compared to the amount of flour I used to eat when I would eat bread and buns and cakes and cookies and all of those things, it's a very, very small amount. That is the end of this 1 ingredient food cooking class that's gone on almost 5 hours total. Now, it doesn't usually go this long, but I would stop it and start it and clean stuff up and move stuff and wash my hands. So it's taken a little longer. It usually will take me, if I was literally doing this all from scratch, it's about 2.5 to 3 hours. If I'm just doing it on my own. If I use the food processor to cut up the vegetables, of course, it would change the look of them. They'd be much more symmetrical. I think actually these I did cut up with the food processor before I froze them. So the next process is to wait for the roast to be done. I flipped the roast over and I added some spices at the top halfway through. When that's done, then I'm going to slice that into pieces and add it to these meal preps. And I'm actually going to probably wait until tomorrow because beef that has been cooked in the slow cooker always is easier to slice the second day. I like it sliced thin like a pot roast. So I'm actually going to put all of this in the fridge. Many times this is what I'll do. I'll put it all in the fridge. And once that is ready, then I can portion everything out. A lot of times I won't portion it out, but I want to show it to you in a future video where I do portion it out and what that looks like and how it doesn't have to look the same. You can mix and match. And because I have a lot of variety, this is super enticing to me because I'm learning to eat this way and I know my body's going to love this food. I'm not going to have stomach aches. I have very few allergies, if any. If I eat this way, I just feel really, really good eating this way. Oh, I was going to say one other thing over the years that I've learned. And actually, I think I learned this way back when, where if you have raw meat and you cook it, so raw meat that's come from the freezer, and you cook it, you can put that back in the freezer one time. If it's something that's already cooked and you thaw it, don't put that back in the freezer. That's for health and safety. You can get sick from that. So that's for the meat. So these were raw when technically sausage has been cooked, especially this farmer sausage, but I still treat it the same way. So I hadn't cooked it. I had put it in the freezer in slices. I brought it back. Now I don't want to put that back in the freezer. I'll eat that, or our family will eat that over the next week. For the eggs, I don't like eggs that are boiled unless I can chop them into small pieces. So when I'm doing the meal prep, I'll show you what I do with a slicer. because my favorite way of eating eggs is scrambled, which means it's all together, because I don't like the taste of either of the sections of eggs separate. What I'm going to be doing with the meal prep is showing you what you do if you were going to microwave it, but you can also take it, put it in a oven safe dish and heat that meal up in the oven or a toaster oven, or on the stove if you wanted to, but then it would basically all congeal, or I mean it would all blend together like a stir fry. But a lot of this would actually taste good all together. I don't know, the spinach turns everything green or black. The liquid on the bottom of the spinach is always black. So it depends on how much you want it to taste all together. And then the garlic turned out great, and you can sprinkle that on top of just about anything. It makes everything taste good. So we've got everything done, and thank you for watching. This is the pot roast, which is turning out awesome. So I put the seasonings on top. When I'm finished cooking it, I'll strain it out, and then I'm going to add a bit of flour, put it in a pan with the flour, and then thicken that like gravy. Gravy is turning out really well. I just added a little bit of flour. First of all, I strained it out from the pot roast. Add a little bit of flour and some seasoning. So this is the next morning. As I said before, I was going to let everything sit overnight so that I could cut up the roast beef. So with all the one ingredient foods that you've been cooking, now you can do the meal prep. So I'm going to cut up the roast beef that had been cooking in the slow cooker over, I think it was 7 hours total that I cooked it. I'm going to cut off the fat. I don't particularly like eating the fat, but some people in the family do. So I just cut that part off around the edges. And once that's gone, now I didn't season that side. Originally I cooked it half the time with the fat up so that the moisture is going in. I flipped it over and then I put some of this spices on top. It's ground onions, garlic, pepper, salt. So I'm going to cut it into slices, and this is way easier to cut when it's cool. Now you can have it the day of cooking it. Lots of times I'll do that, but it will just flake apart and then it doesn't look as presentable. This is a lot easier to cut. I had sharpened my knife yesterday. Before I was doing all the cutting, I probably could do it again because this is a little bit hard to cut through. This meat wasn't as fatty as some meats, so it is a little more dense to cut through. The fat was on the outside, it's not very marbled. Marbling is the term they use. Anyways, I'll finish cutting all of this meat. It's way easier to cut it all at once, make a mess, and then put it in the containers. I don't have enough containers for all of this food, but I'm just doing it to be an example for you of how you can portion out all of the food that you've been cooking and to make it have variety. So that's an example of the meat there. So the best thing to do is just to lay out all of the dishes, and I've got odds and ends here of plastic containers and glass containers, and I'm literally just going to mix and match and make them not all exactly the same, because that can be, for me, it can be boring. Now last night we ended up eating almost all of the potatoes with the cheese on top because it was so delicious. So I'm going to use the boiled potatoes, and I'm literally just going to put them into some of the sections. Now, because I'm not using rice or pasta, which I used to eat a lot more in the past, then the potatoes is the starch, and I find it makes me not miss the pasta and rice as much. I have had rice off and on since I lost the weight, but when I was losing weight, I rarely ate pasta or rice. So that's an example. I'm going to go ahead and do all of these. This is the cheese sauce. It got really, really stiff, which I was afraid it would, so it's not going to be as easy to put into the containers. So I'm just filling up the containers here. The next thing I'm going to do is the chicken. I'm going to put a little bit of chicken on some of these, and I'm going to use up the rest of these potatoes too, just so I have space. This is a portion that I will eat for a meal, and I have 2 of these in a day. And when I was losing weight, I ate 2 meals, 1 meal or 2 meals a day. Now, if you have high metabolism or are quite athletic, you might need 3 of these. So 3 meals spaced apart with no snacks, because you just won't get enough vitamins, minerals, nutrients, protein, all of that. I do not follow what many people say, where you're supposed to have, 200 grams of protein. And that is also for someone who's exercising a lot. I did learn a lot about all of the micronutrients and macronutrients, but I realized that there's so much out there and a lot of it conflicts. And so I basically figured out a way to make it so that I'm not having to count things all the time. And having all of this different variety, having the 20 types of vegetables throughout the week, plus some fruits, makes it so that I'm not feeling deprived, which makes me not eat the junk food, which overall is the ultimate goal, is to somehow get through life with all the temptations around us and to eat healthy. That's my take on that. I'm not claiming to be an expert on this, and there's so many experts that have conflicting advice, which means who's the expert? Now, I know there's scientific studies to say this amount of protein is good and that amount of protein is good, but then there's another scientist that comes along and says the opposite. This is what I'm doing with the eggs. I have this handy dandy little cutter, and I'm cutting up, like for this particular meal, there'll be more eggs. And I'll put some eggs in this one. Now, this isn't just for me. This is for other people in the family, that they can pick one of these trays and say, that's the one I want to eat. Got to have a fridge in order to eat this way. It's really difficult if you don't have a fridge to eat. You got to eat out. You got to buy the salads. You've got to buy the foods that are in someone else's fridge. So I'm just continuing to cut up these eggs. These turned out perfectly. This was 14 minutes. There's no gray. If there's gray around the edges, then they're overcooked. So they usually say 13 minutes, but I found 14 minutes works perfect. There's no gray and they're cooked all the way through. So everything has potatoes. I'm going to add some meat to some of these. 2 pieces of meat, or 1.5 pieces of meat. That's got 2 types of protein. It's part of it is the types of foods, and part of it is making it not boring. So this has 3 types. So I got a little bit of chicken and the sausage and the beef, and not boring, and some variety. And this really is how I've been eating for almost 3 years, and it really makes the diet work. It makes it not feel like a diet, because I'm not having to count. I'm looking at what I feel like eating in that day. This is the onions. This is the spinach. I'm going to put a little bit of onions on these potatoes because that will taste good. This is the stir-fry cabbage, which goes a little funny color because there was purple in the original stir-fry. Some of the Brussels sprouts over here. So as you can see, I'm just mixing and matching. And then at the end, I'm not going to finish these, but you can just get the idea of what it's going to be like. I can add some peas to some of these. And then this is this delicious tasting cheese sauce, which was made from the roux, which is the butter and the flour mixed together. And then I added the cream, the bone broth in there. I was trying to make it a little thinner. It's a bit thick. This just tastes good on everything. So this is going to be on the potatoes and the Brussels sprouts. And so when you heat this up in the microwave, you could have it in the container, put it on a plate, and then spoon this over top, because otherwise it's going to make a mess if you put it in here and then put it to the plate. But actually the plastic containers I don't heat in the microwave. I would take these out, but this is just an example. The glass containers I can heat in the microwave. What happens with plastic, I find, is that any food starts to color it, and I don't know if it's actually super healthy to have plastic. Some plastic is okay for microwave. So as you can see, some of these are complete. Some of these I could fill up a lot more. And then of course we've got the gravy over here, which got quite thick. So I'm adding a little bit of that on top of these. Oh, this just tastes so good. I can't wait to eat these. I think the reason I like this is that there's so much variety. I've seen a lot of people post meal prep and there's, 3 or 4 things. This is 20, almost 20 varieties of vegetables and meat combined. And so it doesn't feel boring. And so when you're eating just this kind of food and you don't have that variety like we used to have when we would eat breakfasts, that you get your pancakes and then you have your sandwiches and then you have your pasta. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner were very different. It was a lot of variety and you didn't feel bored. When you're eating main meals for your meals because you've weaned off of so much baked foods and so many grains, then it can feel boring. And that's why I've tried to find a way to make it not boring. And having the variety, mixing and matching, and realizing my lunch and my supper are the 2 main meals that I'm eating, and they don't look alike. So I don't feel like, oh, it's the same meal. Because if you have lunch and supper, and then the next day lunch and supper, and the next day lunch and supper, and you've bulk cooked and it all looks the same, that's 6 meals in a row, 3 days in a row that is all the same, I would get bored. And that's because I grew up and for 50 years was eating those very specific foods that separated out the different meals in the day. So that's why it seemed more boring to just have the main meals. And this was my hack, was to have variety. And like I said before, it makes me feel good. I look forward to the meals. I know that my body feels better. Almost all of my health issues have been resolved since eating this way, including losing the weight. So I'm going to continue doing it. It doesn't take math. I don't have to count anything. I'm not counting calories. I'm not counting carbs anymore because there's almost no carbs in this food. These aren't the foods that I have to worry about for carbs. There's a lot of fiber from all the vegetables, and it's fun to eat. It tastes delicious. I have no cravings anymore for sugar when I eat this kind of food. I do not crave sugar. Now, I will almost always have at least one of the meals have fruit at the end of my meal, and that's going to be usually frozen blueberries or frozen berries with a little bit of whipped cream on top. And the whipped cream is just plain whipped cream, no sugar or anything added to it, which I mix in a mixer. It's a simple way to eat. And as you saw with the other video, that it took 3 hours, over 3 hours to video that cooking day, I don't hardly have to do anything for 3, 4, 5 days. The kitchen can stay clean. Like I literally come in, put it on my plate, heat it up for 2 minutes and done. So it's such a simple way to eat, I find, and I don't have to think about it very much. So I recommend trying this. Thanks for watching.